Yes, I was going to talk off the record to start with. Answer the question on multidisciplinarity. The answer that was given was an extremely wise answer. You actually have to become a specialist in something before you can contribute to a bigger group. The problem is, people who join multidisciplinary teams have got nothing to offer. You know, they're a bit of everything, but they're nothing of anything. You have a much stronger team. You've got a proper chemist, a proper whatever. They all contribute, make a big difference. And a proper statistician, not somebody just dabbled here, dabbled there, dabbled somewhere else. So actually, it's very well worth, and then join a multidisciplinary team after you've done a PhD. Can I just ask, just to know who is still busy with a PhD? Can you just, yeah. Who's finished a PhD? Are there people who post just one or two? Okay, so look, I might have set this at a level, I'm going to just talk, and I hope that it's going to work out great. I expected there would be more people who had got PhDs already, more aimed at people already going, but let's just see how it goes. Jan was talking about imposters. So, I'm going to just ask you this, who in the natural sciences? Just a few, and the rest are humanities. Okay, so I'm going to confess to you, the bright people are in the humanities. The people in the natural sciences are the dancers. So I was going to DSC a couple of years ago, 2014. I was too stupid to answer the questions. You see, I just asked microorganisms what they thought. So I worked with little bits of DNA that move around in nature and they carry genes with them. And we're not working with the genes that carry, but the philosophy of the pieces that move the DNA and what the copy number must be and how they compete for space. And if they get too high in copy number and take too much space, they make their host weak and such. And these questions were far too complex for me. So I just asked the bugs what they told me, and they told me the answer, and I wrote it down, and the examiner said, very good. So you don't understand my strange sense of humor. This is kind of, there's a lot of truth in that, you know, and the people who do sciences, it's very easy to write in science. You just write an introduction. These are the methods I used. These are the results I got. That's my discussion. That's it. In humanities, you've got to think, how am I going to put this thing together? So there's a lot of truth in that as well. So forgive me for my disparaging remarks about scientists, but in fact, if I even go further, you've got to forgive this because it's a kind of this, I said to the physicist the other day, I was a dean of science for a while, so they accept this from me because I'm just joking with them. I said, I'm so pleased that I'm not a physicist and that you're teaching this. And he said, I would be so embarrassed if I had to stand in front of the class and say, you know, I'm going to tell you something about physics, but I must tell you, we actually don't know what more than 80% of the stuff in the universe is. I mean, we call it dark energy and dark matter, but we don't know what it is. And in fact, the other 20%, well, we don't know what time is, we don't know what gravity is, and it's our apex field. But we can land a man on the moon. And I'm going to talk a little bit about truth just as a thing. So the fact is we don't know what truth is. But I'll tell you what we do know about truth. Truth is things as they actually are. So it is true that I've got a pen in my pocket if I've actually got a pen in my pocket. So in fact, at certain levels we do understand truth, but at other levels we don't. And ultimately we only know truth when we know everything, even from a scientific perspective. Anyway, I don't want to get too philosophical, except I'm going to begin just a little bit philosophically. Which way do I go? And that is to really say, and I'll tell you why I do this, is because this is now, we're moving on from doctorates to about research. And I think you really, it's getting a big picture, as Jan was saying. Research is really about knowledge. And I've had a few students who have wanted to do research, but I've seen actually they're not interested in it. You know, they're not interested in what it's all about. And if you're not interested in what it's all about, then it's not for you. You know, so it's actually the growth of knowledge. I've had a brilliant student once, and she left. She was doing so well. She left. I said, so I can't understand why you're going. She said, well, I've got a job. And what is your job going to be? Well, I'm going to work for Norwich Union. You know, they've closed now, but it was an insurance company. And her real goal was to get a job. It wasn't actually to do research. You know, that was her main. She didn't actually wonder what it was. It was just an aim for a job. Probably one of the brighter people I've had. You know, so the point is, you must want to do it, because it's tough at times. If you don't want to do it, then you'll come unstuck when it gets tough. And so you're in the knowledge business. Is really what it just says. You can't avoid that. It's what one does. And in fact, it's more than just a knowledge business. It's an attempt to search for truth about something. Now, the truth, don't forget, I'm not talking about absolute truth. I'm talking about truth about something. It's this pen in my pocket. It's that type of level of truth. It's not at the very high philosophic level of truth. It's at this basic level of truth about something. And where this brushes up with what I've currently been doing as a university research integrity officer, if you are about finding the truth and you start fiddling stuff, well, what's the point? You know, you've got to be someone who works with integrity, or you're not going to come out with the truth. You know, if the statistics don't fit my idea, well, then I can't choose other statistics. I've got to check it out. You know, it's all part of a pursuit of the truth about something. And as I said, it's a special type of knowledge too, is research. It's meant to be evidence-based knowledge. Now, this applies to humanities as well as sciences. You don't think it only applies to humanities, except sciences. It applies to everybody. I was reading a book, some fantastic books by a guy called Niall Ferguson. He's one of the foremost historians. And he doesn't just give opinions. He lays out facts from which he makes his opinions. And you can maybe not agree with his opinions, but at least he's got the stuff on which he's making opinions. It's evidence-based history. You know, so that's what makes it different from unsubstantiated opinion. And so, and science itself, and when I take science, I'm talking about science, including political science, anything that has a scientific approach to it, which is getting evidence, includes humanities. You know, we can have theories and hypotheses and questions and so on, but for it to be scientific, it must be supported by evidence. And the evidence that you normally work on is gained through research. Even if it's just to go through literature, to go on other people's evidence, it's still got to be based upon evidence. And I was just joking with Jan because he talked about what was sped out of communism socialism and capitalism. I said, well, they're equally good if you understand that the broken part is not the system, it's the people. We're the broken part, you know. It doesn't matter what system we adopt. If we're broken, nothing will work. And if we really fix, anything will work. So that's also deeply kind of philosophic, but anyway. Yeah, no, I must discipline myself. So the idea with the scientific method is to try to remove what I call the human brokenness. Some people don't like this idea of brokenness from knowledge generation. But what I mean by that is, and I put up some words there, prejudice, the cultural biases that I have, the subjectivity that I have, ethics, and I go on, it's to take knowledge beyond just opinion, because my opinions can be loaded with my stuff. And I've got to try and get that out, and I've got to try and look at what's left you know, after I've taken my. So it's also very philosophic, but that is in fact we have a scientific approach if we do that. The other thing about science itself, natural sciences, is we tend to put numbers to things. But I'm going to argue for you that in the humanities where you can, you also put numbers to things. Because if you don't put numbers to things, you can talk nonsense. Because ultimately, books must balance. We're very weak at this as human beings. As human beings, we're weak at this, is putting numbers to things. So I've heard union members, for example, say, there's 60,000 of us. If we take the pay from the worker, from the senior staff, and we give it to ourselves, then that's the solution. We'll put numbers to it and see if it is a solution. And it might end that it's not the solution. Well, because the three bosses of the three platinum companies earn 60 million, 6 times 10 to the 7. And there's 60,000 workers in this union, so it's 6 times 10 to the 4. Divide 6 times 10 to the 4 and 6 to 7, it's 1,000. So it's 1,000 rand per year. Are you happy with 1,000 rand per year? No. Well, that's not the solution. It may be that you're getting paid too little, but that's not the solution. The solution must be somewhere else. Why do I know it's not a solution? Because I put numbers to it. You know, so by putting numbers to things, you will sort out what needs to be done very often. And that applies, I would argue, to most research. And then the other thing, and I took away a next slide, which is about peer review. But it's because I'm so prejudiced and we're going to get other people to have a look at what we've done. And when they give us the go-ahead, it's often because they've helped me get rid of all those prejudices, the wrong methods, or all the selection of data, all the other stuff that I might do. And we really only accept work as being part of the body of knowledge once our colleagues, who are specialists as well, have looked at it and said, that's okay. And even then it might not be right. But at least it's as good as we can go, because there's no other standard that we can use except specialists who work in the same similar field and are acknowledged as being specialists in the field. If anybody wants to talk about this afterwards, we can have a look at it, because it's a very, very important part. So I've got now a little bit about becoming an academic or a professional researcher, and I'm going to quickly put down a few things. First of all, you need research ideas, something to work on. Generally speaking, you need students or researchers, unless you can do it all yourself. And that's not always that easy to do when you become an academic, or it's a duty to train other people. And then you need facilities and equipment. So in the natural sciences, we need a lot of that. If you're not in the natural sciences, you still need a computer, and you need access to databases, you need whatever. So we all need this to a certain extent. And then we need funding. Either, well, I'm going to tell you what the funding is now. And a lot of the mentoring, I do a lot of mentoring of staff, and one of the things I do is to have a look at where you get your students from, and how you recruit them, and how you supervise them, and what sort of meetings you have, and so on. We talk about facilities and equipment, and how to buy the stuff, and how to make do with equipment you don't have, and how to collaborate with people for stuff that you need, and so on. How to maintain it. This is a big subject. And about bursaries, and how to get writing grants, and how to get funding, because we all need that. And I think that applies to a certain extent in the humanities, arts, law, theology, commerce, maybe to a lesser extent, but you still need students to have bursaries, and you've got to work out where you're going to get funding from, where you're going to funding to travel to a conference from, so on. But the most important idea is the research ideas. Now, I learned this when I was still a young person, and this really helps, I think. That's why I want to focus just on this, because I'm going to make the case that if you don't have good ideas, and in fact, Jan made this as well, you actually don't have anything to work with. You know, you've got to identify something that is worth working on. And if it's not worth working on, it's not worth working on well, if I can put it that way. Because we have to look for a high standard of stuff. And often I have students who are demotivated, and I say, well, the problem with your project is that it's not worth working on. And if it's not worth working on, it's not worth working on well. It's one of those sorts of things. And so we've got to really find this is just so important, is the research idea. So I was moaning, because I used to be a scientist, as I told you, and the CSR used to provide all the funding in those days before the National Research Foundation was established, and FRD before that. And everybody used to get the same, no matter what project. You got 3,000 to 4,000 rand in those days. And I said, well, we haven't got enough money to do anything. And he was Mary Nadir. So there's Mary Nadir Road is the road that runs in front of the CSR, named after him. And he said, young man, if you've got good ideas, we've got the money. And he was right. Our shortage is not lack of funds. It's lack of good ideas. He's absolutely correct. And I learned that throughout my life. And so what I'm going to try and help you now, is these things are not difficult, are difficult to come by. Really good ideas. And it's to try and help you how to find them. So as I'm just saying, I think it's the most challenging part of research career, as I've just said to you. I mentor many people, and I can see where they battle with often is, but what should I do? Where's my drive? Where's my idea going to come from? And that is the type of thing we have to look for. Very difficult to come by. And I like to illustrate this. I'm an avid reader of New Scientist. I think I've read every issue of New Scientist, every article in every issue for 18 years or something. I mean, I read it extensively and many other things. But here's a little joke from it. So this guy is a professor's notes are categorized for future reference, and you can see he's got the key as to what notes he's put in his cupboard. And the good ideas are the orange ones, second from the top there. He's also got some sublime genius ideas, and he gets ideas that need more work, and post-pub thoughts, and mediocre ideas, and seemed like a good idea at the time, and what on earth was I thinking, and absurd nonsense. And he says, I ought to order more purple boxes. Because if you look at these little cabinet there, he's only got one good idea, and he's got no sublime genius ideas, because that's how it goes. They're actually pretty difficult to find something really worth studying. And if you do find it and you keep it up, you become an A-rated scientist, or whatever it is. It's because it's really what you need to have a look for. Something that people haven't thought before, something that you are special at. And these good ideas help you to attract funding, as I've already just said. Students come, if you've got good ideas. They're also looking for good things. It results in good publications. Invitations to attend international meetings. They flood in faster, you can cope with them. You get invitations to write reviews and so on. You don't have to force your way. Why? Because you've got good ideas. You've got good ideas, the door's open for you. But the idea is you've got to keep looking for good ideas. And that was always my challenge, if I can just put it to you. I would have a paper, I would have some good idea, and I'd work on it for a while. And then I'd think, yeah, okay, so this is going to go into a top journal I know because this is a good idea. But where's my next good idea coming from? And so I have to start looking. And oh, cool, there's another one. Where's my next one coming from? That was 35 years of just hunting ideas that were good enough to get into top journals. That's my career, hunting the good ideas. The students did the work. I hunted the ideas. Now, in humanities, it might be a little bit different from that. Because you just, and in the sciences it can be as well. I happen to know somebody in chemistry who's got a research chair, and I'm not going to tell you the names or anything else, but he often, I was surprised when I heard this, he just says to his students, well, find your own project. This is the field we're working in. You can just find it. I could never do that because it takes too long, and I've got grants, and I've got to answer for the grant money, and and you've only got 3 years, so I never had the luxury to just say, go and run around with good ideas. And I've done the reading of the literature. So, like Jan was saying, if you're not in a field, you've got to read the literature so that you make sure you don't redo something that's already been done. That happened to me once or twice early on in my career. Once I got into it, it didn't happen again because I was now in the field. So it was then just looking for these new ideas. They can be academic, fundamental. They can also be applied. It's really just a matter of doing good work. So how do you find these good ideas? Now I'm going to give you some suggestions. The first is that activity is better than non-activity. So what do I mean by this? So I'm going to try and give you some examples from my own experience. So I was an undergraduate student at Rhodes. And he was a very good professor there. He was my supervisor at the time. He became vice chancellor at Rhodes and deputy vice chancellor at UCT and so on. Still a friend of mine. But he was doing work that I thought was just terrible. He was taking hides from an abattoir, and he was cutting out little plugs of them and counting the bacteria on them. And I thought to myself, now, why do that? This is so stupid. Because bacteria were degrading some hides. I mean, this is just I wouldn't give an honest student to do this. But it was an activity. And what he discovered is that only some of the bacteria produced collagenase, which is the enzyme that breaks down the collagen, which is what hides are made of. And then he found that, in fact, they didn't always produce the collagenase all the time. They only produced the collagenase if they were growing below 35 degrees centigrade. When the animal was alive and the body heat was up, they didn't produce it. When the animal died and the body heat was down, then they produced it, because that's what bugs do. They recycle skins when the animals died, but they didn't attack it when it was alive. Oh. And then we found that they only turned on when collagen's around. They're not turned on if collagen is not around, but others turned it on all the time. And before we knew where we were studying, so what switch of the genes turns on the collagenase operon or not? Now, nobody had worked on this worldwide. So, in other words, what I'm saying is activity, even though it was a stupid activity, and I can go on. Somebody just put a bunch of dips, so there's something degrading this dip. It normally lasts for 2 months, but 2 days, and this dip's finished. What's doing it? So we look at what bugs are in there, what's breaking it down, what are the active ingredients. No bug is breaking it down as far as we can tell. But then we started a few other things in it. All of a sudden it disappeared. And it is a phenomenon that's known well. It's called co-metabolism. It can't actually break down the active ingredient in the dip, but give it something else that it can live on, and it lives on that and breaks us down as a side reaction. And so there you go. Now you just start doing something basic. Keep your eyes open, and you'll find something. Now I've talked about the natural sciences, and I see many of you are not natural sciences. But read the literature in and around the field. This takes work. There's not a shortcut to it. We run journal clubs. I run journal clubs for the reason that it makes students read. It makes me read. I participate in the journal club. Because if I didn't participate in the journal, I wouldn't read either. You know? So we help each other in this way. Read books, read newspapers, get involved in society, look for gaps in knowledge. Why I'm saying this is, you can get these ideas from anywhere. You can serve on the committee of your child at school. And if you keep thinking about where's my next good idea, and you're in the social sciences, your good idea might come out of serving on the committee. You've just got to realize, I'm looking for good ideas, because that's what researchers do. In other words, you're getting being a researcher and looking for new knowledge and understanding of things into your being. Then it becomes a total pleasure. Then it just becomes so exciting. But you've got to, if you don't want to do that, then rather don't get involved in research, I guess. Another thing is you can attend national meetings, international meetings, but you don't normally have to have money to those. If you haven't got those, just go and listen to lectures. And I can often listen to a lecture that's totally out of my field. And in that lecture, because I'm looking for stuff, I will discover things that I didn't believe I would have thought of had I not gone to that lecture. Nothing to do with my topic at all. But if you can think laterally, you pick up, I can get something out of there. So it's keep your mind open. And I wrote there, look for controversy. This has been amazingly fruitful for me. Some people say this, some people say that. In science, they both can't be true. In humanities, they possibly could. But certainly in sciences, they're not both true because the one is mutually exclusive to the other. So work there and sort out which one is true. That has delivered amazing difference. If I could get my publication list, I would show you how many highly cited articles came from just that thing. Go to a conference, listen, where is the debate? Think about it, read about it, work on it. There you go. Once established, things tend to come your way, especially if an applied aspect, but also fundamental, especially if you're respected. People will want to come to you and ask you for help with various things if you're a respected fundamental scientist. But if you're an applied scientist, things come your way as well. I was listening to a talk, I won't give his name, by a guy at UCT, he's a cosmologist. So he studies big data, and he tries to, they take pictures of the night sky where there are millions upon millions of light points, and he's trying to work out which ones have moved. So he's got algorithms that work out which have moved. But he takes his stuff, and he's working on timetables of the bus system in Cape Town, because they stamp the ticket in and they stamp the ticket out. And so he's working on which routes move the fastest and which ones don't. It's all used basically applied mathematics, which is what he's all doing. The point is, just start doing something, keep your mind open, and you'll end up doing amazing stuff. So now where to find this research topic? I think PhD or postdoctoral experience is a good starting point. As I said, I thought most people were a bit beyond where you are. But nevertheless, this is a very good starting point. What do I know already? But very often, or applied projects, very often you can't carry on what you know because somebody else is doing it. There's not a gap there. But you learn the techniques whilst you were doing that. And then you're looking for your own field that you can establish yourself in. But at least in start of what you do know, and many people that I talk to about their careers, we look at that and see what we can do before we look at new stuff, at least to get going. And then applied projects, often to look at local problems, local activity, local issues. It's very difficult to find international ones, although there are international ones. But you can slot your work into a big international thing. I do like the idea of Jan is that you keep the big picture in mind, and if you can find it where your work fits into a big picture, you get funding from all these bodies that are all around the world. If you keep too local, then you don't get that. So, but work locally as well. It gets you in very often. So in the case I asked, where does my field, which is microbiology at the time, interact with South Africa's biggest industry? And I thought that was the mining industry. So I started to work on the genetics of biomining bacteria that involved in extracting metals from ores, because there was nobody in the field, and so I could become an authority on it very quickly. But it turns out I was wrong. It was never South Africa's major industry. South Africa's major industry by a factor of 2.5 was always agriculture. So you can even be wrong, and you can still end up in something which lends you onto. But that's how I did it, because I knew there would be funding there, and so on. And I was funded my whole career just because I was working on fundamental work. I didn't even do anything for the company. just said, well, if we sell this equipment, and if we can just say we work with you, that's good enough. We keep funding you. It was like that. It was a handshake, no contracts. Just keep working in the field, and we'll keep funding you. So, but to take on low-risk projects, I did mining, brewery, ASCI, that an effluent problem I won't go into, pharmaceutical manufacturer, and things break down. But you could take on other projects, low-risk projects yourself, as a humanitarian. Once you get to this level, where you're going to have your own students, or look for them now, where there's not much risk involved. They're like honor students level. They're still learning the techniques. You can learn techniques using just about anything. But in the meantime, you're finding somewhere that will help both them. The thing is that we've got to love our students. So it's not a matter of abusing your students. You've got to love the students. When you say, I've got to love you. If I don't love you as I'm standing here, I talk to nonsense to you. I've got to try to say, look, I'm trying to do the best I can. Otherwise, it doesn't work, you know. So it's a matter of. Okay, so I gave a talk like this at Ames, and so I was just telling them about mathematics, and I just tried to illustrate this. You know, besides pure maths, there's maths in the financial industry. There's square kilometer array. There's big data. Everything. There's artificial intelligence. There's robotics. Modeling, neural networks is a big thing at the moment. Coding, fluid flow, that's just an example of liquids moving through pipes and so on. Material stresses, biomass, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. So it's almost every field is like this. It's just a matter of whatever it is. And then you can't work on this. So you've got to try and then, what is it that I think I want to make a contribution to? Because if you're too scattered, you also don't make an impact. Nobody knows you. And you can make your best impact when you really get into a field. Doesn't mean you're stuck in that field for the rest of your days. You can move. But you want to get yourself deep into a field before you offer to help other people. Then you can really help other people. I want to go on and on talking about that. Aren't there other suggestions and comments? Because when I have time, often I just say, so, do other people have other ideas as to where you can find research topics from other people's experience? If anybody wants to say something, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, I'm just going to tick along. But if you've got no good ideas as a researcher, there's still something else you can do. Go and join somebody else who has got good ideas. That's very acceptable. Work with them for a while. Look for your own. Many people do a postdoc, or something like this, just to get more experience. But ultimately, it's dependent upon somebody has to have the ideas. I'm going to go through this very quickly. The types of strategy. I've noticed that you can take different strategies to research. I've got here, pick a topic and follow it. So I picked a topic and I followed it wherever it led me. So I had to find out new things all the time. So as I said to you, I worked with organisms that broke down minerals. So I looked at how do they break down iron that's in there? How do they break down the sulfur that's in there? They grow at very low pH. How do they tolerate the low pH? Worked out that they grow in just about no nutrients. They fix carbon dioxide. So how do they fix carbon dioxide that's different from plants? Do they need nitrogen? How much nitrogen do they need? How do they get in? They grow in minerals that have a lot of toxic materials in it. So they need arsenic resistance because one of the minerals had a lot of arsenopyrite. Gold's got in arsenopyrite. How do they tolerate the arsenic? Each time I was a novice. I didn't know anything about nitrogen metabolism. I didn't know anything about arsenic resistance. I didn't know anything but I learned. I just took the topic and I ran with the topic and then I had to learn the techniques and the background as it ran. So we can do it. We can say that, if I take another example, it could be, say, how do people who are poor perceive an education system, or whatever it is, you know? And then you can say, okay, so that's my topic. And then you can say, well, I've got to look, so what happens if you're poor, but you come from, with this sort of background, or you come from that sort of a background, or, you know, you can keep chasing stuff, but you've picked a topic, and then and that's when collaboration often comes in, interdisciplinary. So, and that's where I used to, although it might have been in my general field, but I would go to a specialist in, say, arsenic resistance. And after 4 or 5 years, I was a specialist. This is just amazing. You know, won't you review this paper now for us? Well, you've published so much in it. But no, you're there now. You know, this is how it happens in life. You know, you become somebody senior just by doing stuff. You know? And if you do it at the right level, you get knowledge very quickly. It's amazing how little you have to do before you become an expert. The other way is actually to get a technique, and I've seen this happening in the sciences, but also in the non-sciences. So You might have a technique. So here's Nitesh, if I don't mind using it. So Nitesh is one of my mentees. I see. He's here. I wouldn't know who's been here, but he is here. And Nitesh works on a technique. And that technique is, if I've got stacks and stacks of peaks, and I've got such complex thing, how can I reduce this number of peaks that's overwhelming to which are the important peaks that gives me a hint as what I'm looking for amongst all this. So he works on algorithms, that's a technique. And that he can apply not only to, he worked on a lot of techniques from chlorophyll signals that are given by plants, but he could work on the same lots of peaks that come from that stock exchange, or lots of peaks that come from ECG, of a heart. In other words, he's got a technique. And he might change his field, but it's like, you've got a technique that you apply. Or a technique might be, how I do surveys. How I do surveys under such and such conditions. I mean, or how do statistics, or what sort of questions work and what sort of questions don't work. You can specialize, and then other people come to you, well, I've got a survey to do, would you help me set it up? So there's advantages and disadvantages of that. I can try and explain to you, because you're not dependent upon other people's data unless you generate some of yourself. But I don't have time to go into that. But that's another strategy. Or you're seeing combinations of both. And there's still other strategies. But the point is often it's helpful to know what it is that I'm trying to do, and then to do it. But you need to be strategic. This is the point all the time. I've got to think, where's the publication coming from? Will this attract funding if you need funding? Will this attract a student if you need a student? Would they be interested in this? And so you've got to try and keep these things, and that's what makes it so strategic, to try and weigh up many, many things as you're trying to look for what the new knowledge that you're trying to gain is going to be. This is very difficult, this good original theory. If I have one or two or three things. I've actually got a very good one. It's one of the best in my life now at the moment. And I've written it up with a co-author, but the co-author doesn't understand it. So I've backed off for a while. I realize there's a big gap in knowledge there. I'm just trying to work my way around it. But I've had it checked out by other people to make sure I'm right, and they said, "You're right." It's just a matter of working with this at the moment. But it's based upon an original idea, and to do with very acidic lifestyle. Then there's another type of research is investigative research. So this is to not good idea. It needs to be original thought, but it's like, what is the active ingredient in this plant? Ozone layer depletion, clinical trials. I've said, why is violence increasing? These are also investigative research, investigating what is the effect of poverty on society or different aspects of society. Involves gathering data, analyzing it, reporting on it, and so on. This is investigative research. That's one you maybe identify that some of your research falls into that area. This, Jan was a bit disparaging about, and so am I, generally, which is comparative research. Now, it doesn't mean that it's always bad. It can still be very good comparative research. But the type of work that is, to my mind, isn't really suitable for a PhD is, well, the people who worked in Ohio found this happened in that river, and they sorted out there. So how does it look in the Berg River? It's just like, so whatever they did, I'm going to do. I'm just going to do it again, but with the Berg River, with exactly what they did with the Ohio River. That's not really advancing new knowledge. It's very useful knowledge, possibly, but it's not PhD type of stuff. It's just, however, it may be that you can do a PhD in this thing. So, for example, Jan originally started off doing theology. So it could be that some people have interpreted this passage from the Bible in the year 1820 or something. But now, in the internet age, where people have this, how would one interpret it now? That's comparative, but that's fine, because it's like philosophic, and you're looking at something deeper than just repeating work that somebody else has done. It's got some extra depth to it. And then, as I said, I've already talked to you about controversy research, where there's two opinions and you gather evidence to support or refute the other. That can be, especially if the controversy is a big one. Research into new technologies. So there's a lot of work on this too, and this is a research field in itself. As Jan was saying, studying what a PhD is as a research field, so studying many new technologies, especially this day and age. There's so many new things that are developing, and on the internet and so on, that there's a lot to be done in this type of research. A little bit about a mentor. I think a mentor is very useful if you can find one. Now, in your PhD, if you're still busy with a PhD, then you should have a mentor. Your mentor should be your supervisor. If your supervisor is not a mentor, sometimes they aren't, then you might want to find a mentor. And in fact, I've written here a significant part of my own career. I didn't realize it at the time. It happened, well, my actual PhD supervisor wasn't very useful to me when I did a PhD because he was on sabbatical for 18 months when I did my work. But when I was a new lecturer, that's when he helped me mostly. So you can get a mentor at any stage, and the need for mentor is very widely recognized, can be very helpful, and it can be used throughout your life. So I mean, I could have a mentor now that if they know what to do, is to tell me how to live a productive life when I'm retired. In other words, you never grow out of it. You can always use a mentor. And you can use mentors who are living people or dead. What do I mean by dead? Well, people write stuff. And often you read about what you read is actually mentoring you. And what's the difference between a mentor and somebody who just supervises you, or somebody who just, a book you just read? Well, I would argue this, that a mentor is someone who changes my life so that I want to do things differently, or add something to it that I didn't see before, and that can come from people's writings. It can come from anywhere, but you just, you look for the weaknesses in yourself, and you try and see if you can use a mentor to support you in that way. I'm just going to give you 3 examples of a mentor for me that I learned a lot from after I'd got a PhD already. Enthusiasm for research. This mentor of mine, he used to get so excited that when he saw results on the bench, I used to do a lot of bench work with people in the lab. I was actually doing bench work myself, but for other people, he would get so excited, he wouldn't know what to do with himself. He would kind of, he'd have a thing that he would do. It was just out of pure excitement. And I think you know who it might be. Yes, it's right there. But, so Dave Wood. So and in fact, people used to work hard just because he used to be so excited about this stuff. And then eventually they became excited, And well, I've tried to be the same, when I try to, because I am. It's not, you can't fake it. You either are interested or you're not. And so it's just a delight when you do that way. But I did things very different. I ran lab meetings completely different from he did. I ran a lab different from him. But nevertheless, that's one of the things I learned. The other thing that I learned is that you need stimulation beyond your actual study. And I've written, and I think I might be on another slide later on, but let me just say it here. This is, Jan spoke a little bit about the PhD fraud. And I just was joking with you, and I said, well, I was a fraud with the DSC because I didn't know anything. I wasn't bright enough. I'd asked the bugs what was going on. They told me, I read it down. So, but there is a way in which when I got a PhD, I felt a bit of a fraud for this reason. Not for the same reason that Jan did, from a different reason. It's like, when I was doing honors, I was reading widely. Now I've got a PhD, I'm reading narrowly. And everybody says to you, well done, you're now a doctor of microbiology. But I knew more when I finished honors because I was reading more widely than when I finished my PhD. It was depth, sure, but not the width. And so to stop the PhD fraud, we'd have journal clubs so that you keep width. So it's, and I tell that to the students. Why are we doing this? Is that you don't feel like a fraud when you get your PhD. We know more than just your subject, because that you are not a doctor in sociology who only knows this little bit of sociology. You know a bit of sociology. So it's part of the, and also it feeds into your study, at the same time. So this is and I learned that need for academic stimulation from him. And then the other thing he helped enormously is, I told you, peer review is such an important part. And when I was a new academic, if I got negative comments from supposedly senior scientists, it used to floor you. What do I do now? But he would say, no, look, those comments, and I did this with students, no, those comments are trivial. Well, in fact, that guy's wrong there. They're normally right, your reviewers are normally right, but every now and again they make a mistake. But that comment, unless we can address that, this is a problem for this paper. So it's that thorough help was enormously useful to me. I tried to do that with some new staff that I mentored. And in fact, the one person I thought, well, this is a contribution I'd like to make, is to help you when you come to read reviews of papers. Well, she didn't need my help at all. She was much better than ever I was when I was a student at that age. So we all have different needs. That certainly helped me. But the point is, Oh, and the other thing that he taught me is if you publish in the best journals, they've got the best reviewers. So don't be scared of the best journals. Good work, publish in the best journal, everything is good. You know? So if you work at a high standard, everything is good. You get good papers, good journals, good reviewers, good everything. Work at a low standard, everything is low. You know, it's you scraping a journal, terrible reviews. Oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or she doesn't know. So it goes on. So no, I'm going to skip this because this was for people who were going to be, although it's relevant for us. But yeah, this is also about postdoc. But invest in yourself, intellectually, scholarshiply, leadership, being a human being. Do all these things now that all count later on in life. Being an academic is not just being an academic, it's being a whole person. And you've got to treat people like whole people or things come unstuck. Read, 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 read. I mean, I didn't have enough reads to put there. But in your field, possibly outside your field, because the more deeply you're educated, and this is versus the PhD fraud. And you know, one of the most useful things for me now, because I now have the time to do it, is I have read, I just cannot tell you how many books I've read, all the classics I couldn't read. Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, The Republic by Socrates and Plato, and all these things. And you realize why Oxford and Cambridge called these guys the greats. Because they write great stuff, and it's about being human. You know, so it's, the point is, it all pays off. New science just goes on and on. Expose yourself to new ideas. This is investing in yourself. Tend to do a regular online course. I've done like 20 online courses since 2016, last year. They're not very high standard. It's a bit frustrating, really, but nevertheless, I've done them. And then, you know, you may begin to review papers and grants and so on if you work with a staff member in your discipline, especially if you're a bit past the initial type of student. If it appears to be a self-centered way of living, don't worry about it. Because you almost have to invest in yourself now so that you can help other people later. If you invest in everybody else now, that's one of the problems that I found with young people, then in fact you never get going yourself. I could talk a long time about this. People, but I want to be selfish. No, you're not being selfish. You're actually, it's no good. You were helped when you were an undergraduate student. So now you want to help, but you're failing. So what's going to be the more help? To pass your degree and then go and help people, or to help other people so you don't pass your degree. You know, it's like, so there's a phase in life when you need to invest in yourself, and don't worry, you'll pass it on if you're going to stay in the thing. Talk to yourself honestly. Recognize your strengths and weaknesses and say, this is a weakness of mine, address it. I'd love to play you Leonard Cohen. He says, I'd love to speak with Leonard. He's a sportsman and a shepherd, with my good points. Now forgive me, this is Leonard Cohen's words, but he likes to shop. I'm a lazy bastard living in a suit. You know, in other words, I'm that as well. Now address that. You know, so he does do what I tell him, even though it isn't welcome, because he doesn't have the freedom to refuse. That's his other word. So if I tell myself to do it, I do it, because I don't have the freedom to refuse. Okay, you should also be forming your own opinion on supervision style. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. This is the end of it. And then you also, if not formal, you will have received mentorship and attitude to the students and stuff, and you should begin gaining exposure to this and asking yourself what works and doesn't work, especially if you want to be an academic or researcher somewhere down the line. I'm not going to go through this. What you shouldn't be doing, or maybe don't spend excessive time on something that does not develop you to become a more competent researcher. So if you spend excessive time playing Second Life or whatever it is, it's not good for your career. Or if you're not there primarily to provide a service to either the host institution. This is important for students. You're not an employee. Strive for a win-win situation from which both you and your host benefit. This is really aimed at postdocs, but even as an undergraduate. Don't spend too much time and effort on something that will not be able to publish in some significant form to show that you've done something, even if it ends up in a thesis. And don't do teaching and marking under duress such that it detracts from your research development. I see so many PhD students getting abused by supervisors because they have to mark these big classes. It's not your job. If you are willing to do it as a volunteer, fine. That's why the critical words are under duress. I'm actually abusing you because I'm a supervisor. You can't say no because you're going to need my help. So you mark all these things. That is not what you should be doing. Yeah, so there's some things that we can't do for each other. You have to do for yourself. One of them is choice of career, your life's mission. And research is one of them, but it might not be for you. And stimulate, I was hoping that's what I'm going to do today, was stimulate personal reflection. I mean, I can't think for you, but I was just hoping to raise some things that when you leave, you think about some things, about how to position myself sometime later. And of course, it's a big audience. That's where a mentoring comes in. A mentor can say, well, I'm talking to, I don't know how many people here, 40 people or something, but a mentor can talk to you, whereas I can't do that. And there's a lot of noise in life, as I say. You've got to cut through the noise and get to the heart of the matter. And the heart of research is the good idea. That's why I was trying to cut out all the... It's not the equipment. It's not all the other stuff. It's the good idea. So it's like, cut through the noise, is what that is meant to kind of say. And you can attempt it this year with the research. Okay, this is just a little joke and then I'm finished. This is actually my son-in-law has a brother who he does these little jokes. He was an engineering master student at UCT. He's now left, but he's a little joke and I think it's quite funny really. So he's got on the left-hand side there, why do postgraduates have supervisors? And his answer there is, well, he's an engineer. So let X denote the set of possible tasks range in difficulty. So there is X, easy tasks, more difficult tasks. All tasks easier than M0 are too easy to be of academic worth. So there's M0. All those are too easy to be worth doing. All tasks harder than M1 are too hard to be solved by a postgrad. So all those are too difficult to do. And so all valid dissertation projects therefore lie in, or PhD, in the gap between the two. And E is very small. And it takes decades in a field to determine. This is the guidance you want to your PhD, to get a PhD supervisor. But the joke from the PhD supervisor is to say, they have the postgraduates very plain. They say, you appear to be assuming that this is positive. In other words, that there is something that's worth doing and that you're capable of doing. So, his little snide thing, but I thought it was very clever.
Thank you, Professor Dutt. Is there any questions or comments that you would like to make?
Yes.
Quick question, you mentioned journal clubs. He doesn't describe how those work.
Yeah, okay, so it depends on what the journal club is for, because you can have different purposes of the journal club. So some research groups would say, we're doing reading about what we're involved in. So let's say you happen to be researching poverty or something. Then we have a journal club and all the articles are on poverty and say poverty and education. And that can be one type of journal club. It's not the type of journal club that I used to pursue. I pursued a different type of journal club. And that was, I want to, breadth in science was mine. So it could be, I want you to get breadth in social studies. That could be another purpose of the journal club. So although I work in biomining of the organisms, when our journal club, and I set it by example because I used to choose the articles when I did it. And then the students started following me. So I would find articles on the Neanderthal genome, life without phosphate. There's somebody, but it's a lessons that in fact, there isn't such a life, but it's mistakes that people make. We're published in Science, really top journal, but they made a mistake and I started learning from the mistakes. And then I found my students were running through the best science journals in the world, hunting for wow articles. See, that's another, and there were some students who weren't capable of it. And so they came and gave the journal club. And then it was a matter of me as the supervisor not to maintain their dignity and to point out the value of the work, because every work has value, and link it to other things. That people would go away saying, gee, that was actually just an article. it's... So it depends. It depends what you want to achieve.
So does everyone read the same article?
Yeah, so that everybody read the same article in this particular case. So you could look for an article, then a week before, 10 days before, whatever. Often, as we are humans, 2 days before, you send them out. People read it, and then you kind of discuss it afterwards, what you think the critical parts were and so on. And I used to read, especially the ones for the weak students, that I could help them so that it didn't embarrass themselves. But it's all part of, So it depends on what you, but that can be the goal. So the goal is either get depth in a narrow field in yourself, or, but what an academically stimulating environment. You cannot believe it makes the whole lab, the whole environment. Now I know if you're not working in the lab, it might be a little bit different because you just come in, you go, in some of the humanities. So it might not work for everybody, but anyway. I'd love to talk about humanities people about it. Anything else?
Anything more? Professor, thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge, your vast knowledge, and
Baie
there's
dankie.
something small.
Ek lag nie nodig nie,
Baie,
maar
baie
dankie.
dankie. Dis awesome.